Hey guys, welcome to The Identity Shift. Hey everybody, welcome back to another segment of The Identity Shift. And today I want to welcome a special guest, Janna Hines. So, Janna is here hailing from Dartmouth, but she is actually, I'm going to go through the little intro about her so you can see and hear what I have to say about Janna. So, Janna is a transformative leader in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Janna brings over 7 years experience. It's probably more than 7 years, but it's probably just documented 7 years experience in developing and implementing DEI strategies and more than a decade of delivering impactful keynotes and training sessions. As the founder of her very own DEI consultancy, which is, a thing here in Nova Scotia where we need it, Janna's work is rooted in creating holistic and accountable approaches. God, I love that, Janna. To advancing equity within organizations, empowering communities, and building lasting change. Now, additionally, into her consultancy work, Janna leads of Hope and Hunger, a social media platform dedicated to those wrestling with faith and social justice. Through this platform, she provides a space for those who hold on to hope and more inclusive vision of God. One that transcends the limitations and injustices often found in religious systems. Wow. Now, here we are. Originally from the USA. I can ask you all kinds of questions about that because of today. And now making her home here in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, Janna brings a unique perspective on courage, resilience, and transformation in times of change, ladies and gents. With her husband, Malvin, and their lively dog journey, she embraced new challenges. That would be a huge challenge to move from one country to another, and continued her passion of advocacy for equity and inclusion in her new community. So, thank you, Janna, for joining Tia and the community on Identity Shift. How are you?
Oh, thank you so much. I'm great now. I need to record that intro and use it for like my walk-up music the next time I speak somewhere. Thank you
Oh
so
my,
much.
you know what? I just said that recently. I was keynoting at an awards event last week, and I said, 2025, I need to create a song when I'm walking up here because it's like all you hear
Yeah.
is hand clapping, but it's like quiet. Like I need a vibe.
Yes. I need to set the room, set the tone for what I'm about to speak.
Absolutely. So
Absolutely. Yes.
now that you said it, I'm going to implement it for myself. But your whole miniature, that's the miniature bio because there's more layers about you, I'm sure, was very easy to do. When I did the research, it
Mm.
was very, very easy to do about you. And your diversity, equity, and inclusion work is huge. If you want to, Janna, sorry, if you want to tell us a little bit about who Janna is and what led you to jump in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion firsthand. You're dealing with so many different challenges and changes of moving to Canada, but there's gaps that I'm sure I cannot fill. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Janna.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. A little bit about me. So, as you mentioned, I'm from the States. I'm a product of the U.S. South. I was born in Louisiana. I grew up in Arkansas. My husband is also a product of the South. He was born and raised in Georgia. And so we have seen a lot of things when it comes to the manifestations of racism and power and all of these different things in the context of the U.S. But growing up, I grew up actually in a predominantly white town in Northwest Arkansas. My family had moved from a predominantly Black rural town in Louisiana. And there was a lot of adjusting that I had to do as a little girl, in terms of just not seeing teachers that looked like you, all of the typical things of folks who grow up in
Yeah.
predominantly white spaces, right? And I took that all throughout adulthood, went to college, and I majored in social work. And I knew that I wanted to be kind of this bridge between marginalized communities and people who had power. I didn't know what exactly that would look like. I didn't know what realm it would always be in or what industry. And so with social work, I found myself doing a lot of work in community engagement, of going to the communities and saying, hey, what would you be interested in terms of if it was services for a healthcare system, if it was the development of a program from a nonprofit. I just found myself in those spaces early on in my career from 2016 to 2019. And in all of those conversations, Tia, no matter what community I was in, if I was sitting down talking to folks in the Black community or folks in the Latina community, if I was communicating in English or in Spanish, conversations always came back to power, to race, to resources, to money,
Absolutely.
all the time. And those were issues of equity and inclusion, right? The diversity is a fact because people are different and have different identities, but it always came back to equity and inclusion. And so around the time I was living in Austin, Texas, around 2019, and I was doing community engagement, and I was also doing stuff on the side with some racial justice work in the faith space. So my faith tradition is Christianity, and Christian evangelicals in America were not looking good post 2016 election when
Wow.
the news came out that 85% of white evangelicals voted for Donald Trump. A lot of my peers, those of us who were in these evangelical spaces, found ourselves saying, what does this mean for us? What does this
Absolutely.
mean for how we show up on a Sunday? Because we want to be in this multi-ethnic church, but also we know that folks have voted against our interests, our safety, someone who says things that are very clearly not Christ-like. So what do we do with that? And so I was holding both of those things of the work I was trying to do with some church leadership and the work I was trying to do in my career. And I realized all of it, again, just came back to issues of equity and inclusion. And so in both of those spaces, I just started to try to operationalize what it meant, because whether it was the church or an organization, it's easy to say that you care about diversity, equity, inclusion. It's so easy to say. And that's the thing with most organizations, they have values, but then you go in and nobody knows the values. If they work there, they can't tell you what it means in day-to-day life. And so for both the church and the organizations, my vision now, my kind of tagline for myself is moving DEI from aspirations to operations. That's my
Oh,
tagline.
I love that. Say that
I
again.
moving DEI from aspirations to operations. Janna Hines Consulting, because I want the person who works in IT or finance, or the person who, if they're in a church or a faith space, I want them to know, how does having an equitable lens, or how does taking the extra 2 seconds to be more inclusive in the ways in which I'm operating and showing up and interacting with people, I want them to know how it benefits them, how it makes their organization better, and also how it allows them to better interact with other people. And that drives collaboration, that drives better teams, all of these things. So I can go on a rant about the need
Oh, you
to
sound like me. Yeah.
I can go on a rant about the need to operationalize these things, because, and this was long before what happened with George Floyd, right? This has been something that I've been working on since at least 2013 cognitively.
Yeah.
That little girl who was code switching in Northwest Arkansas, of course, I was always going through these things, but being able to give language to what do I need to do? What are the behaviors that would be present if people were being more mindful and being more inclusive? So the one moment, I guess, after all saying all that, the one moment where I really thought about DEI as a profession was an interview, or it was like the night before an interview. And I was on FaceTime with my mom. It's like back in 2017. And she's, grilling me, asking me questions of, what are your strengths? Right. What do you bring to the organization? All these things, and helping me. And at the time I had braids, and my mom said to me, she said, now, baby, is that what you're going to do with your hair? And I said, yes, because I sat in a chair for about a good 5 hours. I paid a woman a few $100s. I just got these braids. And in that moment, I realized that my mom's experience being a Black woman working in corporate America in the 80s, that was not what you do to get the role.
No.
You get in the door, and just realizing that in that moment, my mother was trying to make sure that nobody's assumptions about my braids would get in the way of my skills, my
Absolutely.
credentials, my resume, because she knew how the world worked. She knew that people do have, and this is well documented, that there are biases for the name Lakeisha or Jamal on a resume versus Emily and Greg, like well documented by University of Chicago and other institutions. So she was trying to protect me from that. And in that moment, I remember thinking, okay, this is my mom who I love, and she's, pro black. She's a wonderful woman, and she's telling me to do this. Like, what are other people going through if they don't have someone who can tell them these things to be able to code switch? Like, why should we be doing this? Why can't the organizations and folks in leadership just be doing the work to stop some of these assumptions so that you can get the best candidate, so that I'm not spending this intellectual labor and actual labor trying to take my braids out, but I can be prepping to give the best interview I can. So that was a
That
defining
was the
moment.
that was the
Yeah.
moment for you, and I love that you mentioned post or pre George Floyd, because in the
Yeah.
U.S. it's been going on. 2010 to 2013 it's been a lot.
Yes.
Yes, it was very prominent with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and the list goes on. But in Canada, it was not an issue. Society didn't see it as an issue. Government didn't see it as an issue. Organizational structures didn't see it as an issue with regards to equity and inclusion and diversity and all that until George Floyd was murdered in front of their eyes.
Mm,
So, I
wow.
mean, you came in after, but prior to that, it was not an issue. It happened. You dealt with it. You fought the good fight where you could fight it with the leverage you had. But there was no consultancies around diversity, equity, and inclusion. That terminology didn't even come out to be a thing until 2020, 2021, when everybody was
Mm,
doing DEI, 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 DEI. And then people started
wow.
building businesses around DEI, DEI, DEI. So I'm really glad that you made a point to talk about this was pre George Floyd for you.
Yes.
This was
Yes.
something that was based on a conversation with you and your mother. It wasn't something that is now an in thing. Let me do a consultation company, a consulting company, to capitalize on the fact that now Canada is hip to what diversity, equity, and inclusion is.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things. I was having a conversation actually before this with Mr. Augie Jones. We were talking this morning about kind of the post 2020 effects of DEI and stuff. And
Oof.
I had to tell him that one of the things that I couldn't sit with in 2020 was this sense that, okay, folks are only paying attention, and folks of, the majority culture, they're only paying attention now because they're at the house, because everything is shut down,
Yeah.
because we're quarantined, right? Because I remember one of the hardest times of my life racially was, to your point, 2012, 2013, when Trayvon Martin was murdered. I remember that. I remember watching the news around that nightly. When I got selected to be commencement speaker for my university, I put that in my speech, that was one of the moments that defined what I would do with my life, was that moment. And then the summer of 2016, that summer was, a lot happened. I mean, Philando Castile was killed. Alston Sterling was killed. 6 police officers in Dallas, Texas, were shot down, and that didn't really move the world in any
Oh, it
way.
didn't, because the world was still moving. They weren't. They
It was
weren't
still,
stopping.
yeah, they weren't stopping. And so that's a big part of my business as well. For a lot of these organizations, is this cannot be based on emotional response. I mean, you're human. Yes, have your individual emotional response. Absolutely. But as an organization, I don't know. That's not fair to people of color, to marginalized groups, that I have to count on some horrific incident happening, and that you don't have anything else going on at the time, and that's going to be what maybe changes a company wide process. Like, that might be, no. So, like, you can have, maybe that's the spark, maybe that's the impetus, but it can't drive decisions. Because I saw so many people saying that we commit to having this many
Yeah.
more Black employees, we commit to this and this and this, and it hasn't even been fully 4 years since
No, it hasn't.
that
No,
happened.
speak it, girl. Speak it. It has
And,
not been 4 years.
and dollars have dried up, programs have gone away.
I
Why?
call that. I call that Black Lives No Longer Matter. Um, and I said this. I said this in 2022 to people, and I said we need to get in now, because Black lives are not going to matter in the next 2 years. There's going to be another buzzword, another issue, another fight that the government's going to be placing money into, and no one believed me. Everybody's like, no, no,
Mm,
no. And I said, now we're in 2024. Black lives no longer matters. Where's the supports? Where's the investing in these black organizations and black businesses? Where is all the buzz? Where is the conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion?
mm-hmm.
Now it's along the lines of, okay, we'll mention diversity, equity, and inclusion, but now we're going to add on everything else, every other letter now.
Yeah, I think that's
So
it's yeah, you're right. I think that that whiplash. I remember being me and one of my friends were invited onto a podcast in 2020, and it was hosted by this guy who titled the episode "A Tipping Point for Systemic Racism." And he asked us point blank, he said, "Do you think that this is like a turning point for systemic racism?" And my friend and I both said no, because again, I've been black 30 years. I've seen over my short 30 years like the whiplash of when things are trendy and have a moment, and
it's a trend.
I don't see anything operationally, or I don't see things,
Intentionally changing.
yeah, I don't see things being embedded into systems. And so for my clients, that's where I try, especially right now, to remove emotions, positive or negative, from it. Because just because you feel passionate today, you might not feel passionate when someone comes in and tries to criticize you or anything like that. This has to be about aligning with your mission as an organization. And this has to be about improving your organization and making sure that anyone who works in your organization, and also anyone who experiences your organization, because
Absolutely.
it's not just employees, it's also what's your external impact.
Yes.
How are they, how all with all of those things, how are they experiencing more inclusivity? Are they experiencing exclusivity? Are they experiencing harm? Because let's put the behaviors and skills and processes in place to ensure that. I always tell people I'm not a minister anymore. Like I'm not a preacher. So some people think that DEI is about changing hearts and minds, and I'm like, listen, I'm not God. I can't do that. But what I can do is help you not get sued. What I can do is make sure that you have processes in place that anyone, regardless of their identity, can show up in your organization and know that they can advance, that they will be heard, that they won't be disrespected, that they will be valued, because those are skills, behaviors, and processes. Hearts and minds, that's above my pay grade. That's out of my
No,
realm.
I can't do the hearts and mind either. I always say I'll leave it for other people. That's not what I'm trying to do.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, not for me, not for me. This brings me to this question because just listening to you, um, how do you define courage in the context of diversity, equity, and inclusion work?
Yes, I love that question. I define courage in the context of DEI as being able to play the long game.
Oh,
And I define courage as being able to think strategically, because it doesn't take, that was what, again, in 2020, it didn't really take a lot of courage to be reactive,
yeah.
right? It didn't take a lot of courage to say, like, oh, like, we believe this and we're going to post our black square. It didn't really take a lot of courage. What takes a lot, oh, y'all had the black squares up here too? Because the black squares, oh, in the States, man, they
Oh my
said,
gosh. Yeah,
black
yeah.
square. Enough is enough. But that didn't, I mean, that really didn't take any courage. But what, to me, when I see someone actually committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the context of their organization, it's the courage to say, first of all, that we are willing to change any of our processes or behaviors in our organization that have been inhibiting diversity, equity, or inclusion. So, first of all, is that willingness that I'm willing to change. I'm willing to name that it
Yeah.
doesn't make you, like, you don't have to put all this emotional weight behind it of that makes you a terrible person or a racist or whatever. Courage to me in the context of DEI is having the self-awareness to say, oh, the things I've been doing, the ways I've been treating people, the ways my organization's been showing up, the ways my brand's been showing up, there might be a better way we could do that. That's it. Just
Okay. Well,
that willingness, and then the willingness to think strategically as opposed to reactively. That's where I find a lot of people actually being courageous rather than reacting for a moment and like getting on your soapbox for a moment and then
mhm.
you shrink back to whatever you were doing. But being courageous is saying, I'm gonna take the time to think about how can this, if I'm not in this role, if I'm not the DEI person, if I'm not the whatever, how can I make sure that these systems will continue to be in place, that the behaviors will be in place so that people are able to not be discriminated against, to thrive, all those things. So again, self-awareness and thinking strategically,
I
that's how
love it.
courage shows up.
I love it. I wish I had you in person right now. I'm rethinking. I should have had Jana in person. This brings me to the next one because this is an issue, and I want you to address how you deal with this. We already know the work that you're doing with the DEI space can be very difficult, and I'm saying difficult with regards to how do you deal with the resistance from certain organizations or businesses that say, yes, we want, Janna Hines Consulting in, we're going to contract you, we're going to pay you $25,000 to work with us. You get in, you start having some uncomfortable conversations, and guess what happens? Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's not what we did. That's not what we meant. That's resistance. Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. That's resistance. We didn't mean it that way. That's resistance. Well, we've
Mm-hmm.
always done it this way, and we've never had no one complain before. That's resistance. How do
Mm.
you directly deal with that, Jana?
Yeah, it is. It's interesting because I have to, for me, the way I show up to that moment, because I've had it multiple times and especially an uptick in the last 2 years of dealing with that, right? The first thing that I have to do is remind myself that as a consultant, I'm here to inform, not convince. I'm
Yes.
here to inform you of the impact of this behavior. That's what, I just have to do that for myself because I do love a good debate. I do love a good conversation. I don't, back down from things, but I have to remind myself, no, 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 no. They have hired me to inform them. And so I have to inform them
Absolutely.
that if you don't pivot or if you choose to continue resisting, here's what will happen. If you choose to continue, here's the null alternative. Here's what happens if you change nothing at all. You will continue to receive the same results that you said you wanted to change. You brought me in here. So I just have to, in myself, remind myself that this is my role. In terms of the second thing, when I think about the other person, I have to, I think consultants, especially in DEI, I have a lot of great boundaries that I set for myself to not move into the role of being an emotional support person or like a therapist.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I, but at the same time, I do think consultants for this level of work have to be able to build trust and rapport. And so I have to do that at the onset by letting people know that we might encounter some impacts in your organization. We might encounter things whether you intended them or not, and it's going to be up to you to decide what do you want to do in light of the impact that I'm telling you. In light of, like, this has been the result. This is what's happening. What do you want to do? And going back to that courage piece, I have to be able to name what's driving that resistance, right?
Yes.
So if someone is saying like, well, this is the way we've always done it, or, oh, like it would be too expensive to try to have accommodations for folks like due to whatever disability they have. Okay. Well, it sounds like, and that's where I have to go into my social work skills of reflective listening and being like, it sounds like there are financial concerns about like the ability and just being able to name what the resistance is. Because a lot of the time people are people, and if I can name what the fear is, if I can name what it is and say, I see that, I see the fear, yes, but let me tell you how this gets worse. Like, let me tell you how this gets worse. So for example, I'll use an example because I don't think people think about the null alternative of like how much
Mhm.
worse things can get, because there's that discomfort in the moment of changing a process, um, that they don't think about it. The example of what happened in Cape Breton at the North Sydney Fire Department,
Girl,
which
don't
is
even.
already, it's a mess. Like, I'm going to talk on an organizational standpoint, not just me and my personal convictions on like racism. It was wild in 2024. If your listeners not up to speed, look it up. North City Fire Department, people came dressed as KKK, and someone in there knew that it was wrong.
Yep.
Why? Because they asked them to take the masks off
Off
and to take the cross.
and
But
take it
instead,
outside.
Yes. And so they thought to themselves, like, I know what was happening in that moment was someone saying, like, oh, that's offensive, but I can't ask them to leave.
Leave.
I
You're a
can't
part of
ask them.
it. Their family
I,
probably comes here, you
it,
know.
yes. And so they made a decision in that moment of my fear of upsetting these four people. If I kick them out, then these four people are gonna be upset and talk about me and maybe post on Facebook that they got kicked out, whatever. That would have been the worst thing that happened. They went with that fear, the fear of potentially challenging how they normally do things, the fear of having to confront someone and say, hey, at this organization, like we're a community place. This could feel threatening to the community. They chose to go with that first fear instead of the fear and the reality of what is happening now. They have a international, because friends in the States texted me and they're like, "Why did you move up there? I thought you said they weren't shooting. I thought you said it wasn't as bad." And I was just like, well, I stand corrected. Like when they saw that, it became an international incident
It is.
because inaction has a cost. I think that's what I try when we're talking about resistance. And I have to know where the resistance is coming from, but I have to make my clients aware of the cost of inaction because right now the North Sydney Fire Department, they are paying for that inaction in terms of like what I've seen just on people commenting on their Facebook posts, the
Oh, it's
news
a lot.
coverage
The,
everywhere.
the news coverage was enough. I got a call from CTV, Global News, CBC, and I only did global. And I've had conversations with the mayor in North Sydney. She's a female, by the way, and
Wow.
she doesn't even understand the gravity, like severity. Like they are. I don't even know if it's resistance for at this point. It's like, well, we made a mistake. Can we just move on and learn from it? Like
No,
it's insane.
no,
Like it's not
no,
going away anytime soon. I think why
no.
it's really so quiet through the political leaders and leaders in the community is because we're getting ready for our election. Provincial
Yep.
elections happening in about what was it, 13 days. So
Hmm.
that is why it's very quiet. But once that's over, shit's gonna hit the fan.
Oh, completely, completely. And I mean, and that's the thing too is now it spills over. It spills over to like that becomes what the North Sydney Volunteer Fire Department is known for. You see what
Yes.
I'm saying? And so that's the thing when I'm working with organizations, because again, I have my own convictions about racism, white supremacy, and everything. But when I'm working with an organization and I'm telling them, this is, yes, you want to be able to have these processes for, hiring people and advance people, but externally, when something happens that goes against your values, how are you prepared to defend that value? For example, if I worked in healthcare and I was rude to patients or I, didn't really talk to the patients or I was rude whenever I was checking their temperature, anything like that, people wouldn't keep accessing my services, even though my healthcare organization might say that we value patient experience. If I keep doing this,
Your
people aren't going
action
to come.
shows differently.
Their act shows differently. It's the exact same thing. So it's also this work of diversity, equity, inclusion is about protecting your reputation. It's not just about being the good thing to do or the right thing to do or a moral thing to do or because you feel bad for a group of people. It's also smart business. It's smart. And I looked at that situation. I was like, a volunteer fire department. I was like, y'all depend on these events to get money. Like
Yeah.
you depend on these types of events to get money
Fundraising. Yep.
from your
Absolutely.
community from your community, but now your reputation is damaged. And like, so anyway, just all that to say that when it comes to resistance, I have to make sure that folks are clear on here's what happens if you do nothing. Like I have to really make that clear to them. And then also, again, just letting them know and just kind of understanding, well, what are you wanting out of this engagement from me? Like what, because I make
That's
it
what I was waiting
clear.
for. That's what I was
Yeah, like
waiting
what like what are you looking for from this engagement with me? Because I have too much going on to just be a black face in a public space and feel like, hey, we got her, like this is our no no no
for.
no.
Yeah, no.
Like it has to be about operations. So if you are coming to me and I start telling you about the things in your operations and ways of being that need to change and you're upset about that, then why did you come to me? Because there are plenty of folks who'll come and talk, who'll come do their thing and peace out, and that's fine. Get your bread. I'm not mad. But for me, it just doesn't sit right in terms of what I need people to, like, a month after I gave the talk, I need to know that they're going to be okay. I need to know that a month after I gave the talk, there's something in motion in their processes, because I've talked to their people, I've talked to their leaders, that I don't need to be there to give an inspiring talk every quarter or something, that I'm putting in the work
Sometimes you do,
afterwards.
girl.
Sometimes you
Sometimes
do
these
now.
organize.
So-
Yeah.
sometimes people do need, there are some people do, people do need different levels of engagement. I have seen that, though. I have seen that. But I
I'm
just want
gonna
to make
call it.
sure.
I'm gonna call it different levels of inspiration, and even be inspired quarterly to do
Yeah,
what's right.
that's
And
true.
it is what it is. But to go to something more positive, more positive, more positive. You created of hope and hunger. So it addresses the tension between faith and social justice, which is, whew, whew. How has your faith, Janna, and the journey of your faith shaped your understanding of the courage and confidence during periods of doubt?
Hmm. Great,
Right now,
great
I'm
question.
doubting my province. I'm doubting our leaders. I'm doubting a lot. So how are you able to utilize your faith to propel you to the other side?
Yeah, oh man, I've had a lot of,
Sorry.
no. It's positive, but it's also like, oh man, it's got me. Yeah, I've had a lot of moments of doubt, like really wrestling with, like, ooh, do I want to be a part of this, in terms of, especially like I mentioned, after the
Yeah.
2016 election, and seeing people that were worshiping the same, like, God is me, going, and
Mm,
it really sat with me. It made me, I remember thinking, like, how is it that you all can pray for me if I'm sick, or if I'm going through a financial crisis, or if I'm going through a relationship issue? When it comes to, like, my blackness or like racism, you don't seem to quite know how to have faith for that, or how to, like, because it goes back to the thing again of aspirations. There's aspirations in faith communities of, like, oh, Jesus loves us all, but when it's actually time to love somebody and stand with them and care for them,
it
that's when
goes
it's like
wrong.
it's time to put it in operations. Oh, you want me to do what? You don't want me to do what? Like, and so, anyway, going back to the faith in terms of times of doubt, after 2016, and especially right before COVID, I went through another time of really questioning my faith as a whole, really, of saying, like, if this is the institution of Christianity, if this is what it is, and it's hurting some of my friends, it's not making space for a lot of my friends in terms of racism and homophobia and all these different things, and women's rights and all of these things, then do I want this? Do I want to belong to this? And honestly, there was, 'cause I also felt like I'd been doing a lot of convincing
Oh
and
yeah, I
trying
can
to
see that.
convince faith leaders, that this was something that God cared about, and that we should care about. And I was going, using all these different texts, using all these different examples in scripture. And I remember I had a mentor once who told me about this passage where Jesus is talking to his disciples about, like, going into towns and sharing the gospel. And this mentor was sharing it with me. And he says, Jesus told his disciples, if you go to a town and they don't receive you, shake the dust of that town off your feet and keep going. And he told me, he said, Janet, it's the same thing when you talk about social justice. It's like, if you go and they don't receive what you have to say, shake the dust of it and then keep
Thank you,
moving.
mentor.
Thank you,
Thank you to
mentor.
the mentor.
Yes. Yes. When he said that, and it was like the light bulb went off, that I was like, wait a second. I don't have to stay in this place. Like, there are other places I could go. I don't have to stay in here. That I kind of started to imagine again what an inclusive faith could look like, because I think, um, one of my favorite passages of scripture is, it's in Hebrews 11, that says that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And so that's where the hope part of hope and hunger came for, is that when I feel doubtful, it's because of my present reality, right? Like, it's because of the
Absolutely.
things I currently see. But if I can hold on to hope and just stay intact with what I want to see, like I want to see an inclusive faith, I want to see more justice, I want to see racial justice, I want to see those things. When I hold on to that, I'm actually practicing faith. Like I'm practicing again, like the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. I'm doing that. Again, I still have my reality, and I'm not gonna be dabbling in toxic positivity and being like it's all fine. Like I'm not doing that. Like I'm still very aware I'm a Black woman in the world every day, but I still like that's also my form of resistance in a way, right? Of you can't take my imagination, like you can't take my dreams and like my hopes for myself and what I know could be possible. Like won't be limited by that. I'm still, again, not going to be delusional and start just being like, oh girl, all you need to do is like, positive thinking yourself your way out of not getting funded. I don't think that at
You
all.
can
I don't
try.
think
You
that at
can
all.
try it. You can try it.
You can try it. You can try it. But I do think still having your dreams, even when they're getting crushed, even when you're getting rejected, even when, I mean, and you know better, cold calling, cold emailing, all that stuff. Like having that sense of like, this could be possible just keeps me going from day to day. And that verse has kept me going from day to day of, it's the substance of things hoped for. So my job is just to hope. It's on God, everybody else to figure out how to put it in, I'm going to take the
Yeah.
steps as well. I'm going to do what's mine to do. But when I lose hope, then that part that's mine. That's my inner work to do. So that's how I've held on to it. And also being in community with other people, normalizing doubt, that
Hey.
saved my life. That really, I think that would have been harder if I didn't find other people. And that's why I wanted to start posting about these things. Because originally the platform was supposed to be more about convincing people of why Christians should care about racial justice and social justice. And then I had my experience of doubt and everything in 2010. I said, okay,
You're like, oh
I'm
no,
done.
gotta pivot. Gotta
I was
pivot.
like, yep, pivot. I'm done trying to talk to y'all. Let me talk to people. And that's what most entrepreneurs and most like people realize, right? Is let me speak to what I know. I know what it's like to feel completely disillusioned with your whole faith community and done with everybody. And like, what's going on here? I know how lonely that feels. I know how spiritually scary that feels.
Hmm.
Let me speak to that, because knowing that other people were wrestling with it and having this sense of, I still like God. I just don't like these people. And I don't like the policies they're putting forward. Like I still love Jesus, but I don't really like what some of his followers, the ways they show up in politics, they show up. And so when you know you're not alone, I think that can help the doubt feel less scary. And it can make the doubt feel less wrong, or that something's
Yes.
wrong with me, that I'm even questioning it. So those were the things that were really big for me in keeping my faith in all aspects of life.
Well, would you give someone else that same advice? Like, what are, some pieces, three pieces of advice you would give someone who's, dealing with chaos right now in their spirituality, in their life, if they're trying to fight social justice and it's all coming together all at one time?
Yeah. Oh man. First thing is, I think, validating yourself. Just validating yourself,
I
and
gotta
that,
write that down.
validating yourself that what you're feeling is there because it matters, right? I think there's a time where I criticized myself, or I thought like, man, I'm just doing too much. Like, who do I think I am? I'm not Martin Luther King. Like, what am I even doing? Like,
Yeah, you
stop.
are. Yeah, you are. You're
Like,
a Harriet Tubman.
there, thank you. I mean, but I used to think like that, and I would invalidate myself from even caring about it, right? Or invalidate those feelings. So I think the first thing is being able to validate yourself, to validate that like these questions that I'm having, or the chaos I feel, it's real. Like when
Yeah.
people tried, I remember in 2016, a faith leader trying to be like, well, you know what? We're all citizens of heaven. So, like, who cares about Trump getting elected? And I was like, well, easy for you to say, because I know I'm a citizen of the United States right now. And I know what that means for me practically. Oh, yeah. Like that was said
Wow.
to me. And so validating yourself, validating your concerns, validating what you're feeling, that's a huge first step. I think another piece of advice would be, like I said, getting around people that are going through so much faith. And that's the beauty, I think, of social media, is being able to have access to communities that might not be right in your neighborhood. Right. For example, at the time I was in Texas, I couldn't really find a lot of really progressive churches that I knew were inclusive of gay people and like cared about racial justice. Those were few and far between, where I was at the time and for what I was looking for. But going online and finding other Black women who had been like on this journey and asking these questions, that was huge for me. That was very, very huge for me. So I'd say, yeah, validate yourself, looking for community, and then I also say looking to those who've gone before us. Like
And
as
on
much
those
as
shoulders.
lean on those shoulders, like I started looking at, I talk about Dr. King quite a bit. I started looking at the things he wrote other than the I Have a Dream speech, and saw that in his letter from Birmingham jail, he was mad. He was mad at white ministers and wrote it down because they had said, they're like, why are you doing all this? Like, God will eventually deal with racism. Like, we agree with you that this isn't right, but you shouldn't be protesting in the street. You shouldn't be shutting down traffic. White ministers told him to cancel his demonstration in Birmingham, Alabama, and he was in jail. And he wrote back to them and he said that you all are worse than the KKK because you would rather have a false peace, which is the absence of tension, than true peace, which is the presence of justice. And so when I started looking at Dr. King speeches and other people, other Black people who had been done with this foolishness, I said, okay, I'm in great company. Like I'm in great company to see that, okay, these people have already done the work of eloquently saying why this is wrong and why God cares about this, and like read everybody and dragged them already. Okay. Because I think the biggest issue during that feeling of uncertainty and the chaos, I think the biggest thing is loneliness and the fear, spiritually, the fear of like, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm going to hell? What if all this stuff? And so when you find any type of sense of validation, community, and then again, people who are wise, who've gone before you and journeyed through a similar path, that's just like, it just helps you breathe easier and see that, okay, I'm not alone in this. I'm not exaggerating. And so like there are,
Not gone crazy.
I'm not, like this is, I think there's things. So those three things would be it. Definitely looking for validating yourself, looking for community, and then looking at those who've gone before us.
I wrote them all down, so I already cut them. Very important. I'm really big on finding your tribe, finding like-minded individuals. Make it very much easier, especially as an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship is lonely, lonely as hell.
Yep.
Friends and family may not understand it; they just don't get it, or they just don't care to get it.
Yep.
Even if you have a fellow male, black male, that's an entrepreneur, his journey is going to be completely different than yours. He's not going to have the same barriers that we have as black women. So I'm
Yeah.
always pushing that, dialogue that you guys need to find your tribe, like minded women who are doing what you're doing. And once you find your tribe, oh my God, things change tremendously. Things
Yes.
become easier. You can breathe easier. You said you want to breathe.
Yes.
So I'm big on that and always paying homage to the people that came before because we
Yeah.
stand on the shoulders of the ones who create the foundation for us to even be able to do what we're doing right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what you've done. That's what BWI is. I remember when I like was first trying to just network and just like looked up everything. I'm doing cold outreaches everywhere. And then I saw Black women in excellence. I said, wait a second. Let me go ahead and look up. Let me send her a LinkedIn message. And it is, you can't really, you can put into words what happens when we all get together, like at the networking
It's different.
spaces.
It's different.
There's a different level of, it's kind of like, I was trying to explain this once to a white friend once, like when she heard me joking around with another Black woman, and like there's like a different laugh that comes out of me, but it's because we have so many shared experiences that I don't have to explain. Like
We
I don't
just
like,
look. We can tell by the look or the way we move our mouth. We pout our lips. You already know when, if I'm saying, girl, look over here at her, by the look of
Mhm.
my eye, that most white people don't understand. And it's like you find your sisterhood. Like, it's different. I actually said that in my keynote. I was talking, my keynote's always
Mhm.
about resilience. And last week,
Mhm.
it was myself and another black person in the space. And I was talking about how it's like to be the only black woman in a space. And then when you see another black woman or another black male, you're kind of like, give the eyes like, hey, I see you. Do you see me? Like, let's make sure we
Yes.
have each other back without saying the word. And when I
Without saying
said
a
it,
peep.
you don't gotta say people. When I said it, I said, he said, I noticed you too. And I said, he was in the front. And I said, I peeped you as soon as you walked in. He said, I was gonna say something, but you were busy talking. And this is during my keynotes. There was 250 people there. And he's talking to me as I'm on stage. And he was like, what she's saying is facts. What she's saying is facts. And that's what happens when a black person sees another black person, when we're always the only black person in our white spaces.
Yeah. And I think it's just there's a certain like cultural warmth. That's the only way I've been able to
It's a
describe it.
safe. It's safe. It
It's a
feels
safe
safe.
space. And just not having to explain. For example, like if somebody has to explain a joke, the joke's not funny anymore. You know what I mean? Like
I'm over it.
if I have to explain to you like, oh, did you like it's not funny. And so that's the thing that happens when we come together with our shared experiences is that there's no need to explain. There's no need to like teach anything. We all like the experiences are there to just be able to just start talking and say, you know, what we're trying to do in business, what's going on in our lives, like all these different things. And so that's a weight off of us in a world where we're so used to having to like explain even to
Everything. Everything.
everything. Just
You
being
were
able to
talking,
show up and just start, and the only thing you have to explain is your business.
and that's it. And be
Yeah, that's
authentically
it.
yourself. Just be
That's it. Yep.
authentically yourself. And I like how you just mentioned one of your white friends, because I had this conversation with one of my white friends. And she's like, I don't understand some of the jokes. Like, because I said to her one day, girl, I see, there goes your best friend right there. And she was like, she's not my best friend. I don't even know her. Like, she's not my best friend. And I was like, oh my God, never mind, you don't
Yeah.
get it. I could say to a black girl, and she'd be going, not my best friend, that's your best friend. That's
Immediately.
your best friend.
Immediately. That's your best friend.
Immediately.
Immediately. Or if you wear one object, like okay, shoes, okay, jacket, okay, glasses, okay,
Oh,
like
you
that is
don't
like
like them? Oh, what's wrong with my shoes or jacket?
I've made that mistake. I've
I
made that
have,
mistake.
I have done it.
I've done it, or I'll
I
be like,
have, or I'll say, "Oh my goodness!" I said, "What I say? Your face is giving what it's supposed to give." And I had a friend say, What's giving it? Like, what do you mean? Like, what is this? What is it giving? Do you not like?" And I'm like, "Girl, it means your face is good.
it
You look
looks
good."
good. You
And
just
she was
feel
like,
good.
"Oh, why don't you just say that?" And I'm like, "This is the type of stuff I'm talking about, girl." Her name's Laura. I said, "This is the type of stuff I'm talking about, Laura. You never get the slang."
And that's
I can
yep,
say it to a black girl, and if I say your look is giving what it's supposed to give, she's gonna be like, "Girl, thank you," because we
yes,
already know.
immediately,
Or you ate.
immediately,
That's another one.
ate it up,
You ate, and they're like, "I
ate it
didn't
up,
eat today." Yeah, no, we can't. We can't.
and
But I
yeah,
appreciate you mentioning the three, because I'm going to highlight them in the podcast.
yes,
It's very important that people who are listening that will say, "Okay, well, Jana, what would you tell us if we were in front of you?" So those, I'm going to definitely highlight that. Um,
yeah.
Looking forward, what are some of the areas where you would want and you hope to see more people step in to with regards to courage and confidence
Mm.
in the realm of DEI?
I think the biggest thing would be having the courage to be disliked.
There's a book I just talked about on my last podcast with Sylvia.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
there's a book. It's called, yeah.
Oh,
It's
I think
from
the book is called "The Courage to Be Disliked."
a Japanese
Yes, yes,
philosopher
yes,
girl.
yes, yes, yes.
It's my
I've had that.
journal.
Yes, I've had that recommended to me a few times. I haven't read the book, and I need to. But I
Girl,
think
if you're
I
going
need.
into the leadership role that I see you're going into here in Nova Scotia, you better get the book.
Okay, let me get the book. Let me go. Let me jot it down
Go
for
on
myself. Okay.
Amazon.
Okay, I'm gonna get it. But I think the biggest piece of courage and confidence is the courage to be disliked, but it's not just being disliked for the sake of being disliked. Like, I'm not a fan of when people are just provocateurs to be provocateur. Like, no, like,
Yes.
like the courage to confront.
Yeah.
Because, and I think that maybe that's a better way of saying it for what I'm talking about, is just the courage to confront. And again, you can be the most, personally, I am a recovering people pleaser. I am a recovering conflict avoider. The Janna of like a good 6-7 years ago, even in my DEI journey, that was how, again, I was just trying to, like, well, maybe if I say it this way, or maybe I give this perfect analogy, maybe then people will come around and, maybe then they'll get it. And now I just realize, like, okay, the only person that's really harming is me
Yeah.
as I'm trying to do these mental gymnastics. But when I confront, either way, I'm going to be uncomfortable. Like, I'm going to
Absolutely.
be, I'm going to be uncomfortable because I'm having to tell someone a hard thing, or telling them that, hey, as a result of whatever you said, or in the DEI context, as a result of this policy or the way that you showed up, this is how it's impacting people. And that's going to be hard to hear no matter what. But having the courage to confront, because your values matter more. And for me, like, for organizations, I'll tell them that their reputation matters more, but on a personal level, my integrity matters more. My,
Absolutely.
like, I have to go to bed with me every night. I have to look at me every morning. And yes, I may be uncomfortable confronting this person and telling them, like, hey, this is not the way to go, or this is whatever. But what is far worse is me years from now seeing something happening and knowing that I could have said something,
Way back
and
then.
yeah, and I didn't choose to. So the biggest piece of courage and confidence is knowing that we have to, if we want to actually make spaces more inclusive, if we want to make the world more equitable, we're going to have to be willing to be uncomfortable. And that confronting people doesn't require, you cussing them out, or like you calling them out of character. It even doesn't always require you being angry. It just requires you pushing through the discomfort that this person didn't think anything was wrong, and just the idea that I'm just informing you. Like, I'm just informed. That's what I have to remind myself whenever even I start to want to shrink back, is saying that I'm just going to share. Like, I'm just sharing my perspective. How this person chooses to react, my dad would always say, your response is your responsibility. I don't
Absolutely.
care.
It's not
I
my
don't care.
business.
It's not how you emotionally respond. That is not my responsibility. But I'm just here to inform as kindly as I can, as much as respect, that I need to confront this. So, and again, going back, North Sydney, North Sydney Fire Department, like, that was what needed to happen, was someone being willing to, again,
To
embrace the
videotape
discomfort.
and put it out there because it's probably happened before and no one was comfortable enough or courageous enough to post it, to put it out there. And that
Yes.
one woman, she took pictures and videotaped it and she put
Mm-hmm.
it to social media
And
immediately.
Twitch social media. Yeah. And so in that moment, like, they had the courage to say, okay, this is what the fire department is doing. But that one person in the fire department who mustered the tiny bit of courage to say, can you at least take the hoods off? It's like, no, 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 no. Like, you gotta, if you're already at that level of discomfort, go ahead and push the full discomfort and
Yeah.
say, hey, you have to leave.
Or
Like,
call
just
911.
that.
I said this in my interview with Global, and I said to them, if it was 3 or 4 black males coming in there with urban clothing on, hoodies, whatever, they didn't look like they fit in, they would have had no problem with calling 911 on them.
Without a doubt. Without a
But
doubt. There
this
would have
was
been no.
normal. This was normal for them. It wasn't a case of, oh my God, like, call 911. You see this. It was like, oh, here we go again. Like, can you guys please take your hoodies off, put the cross in the car, and come back in? I can imagine how that scene just played out that night.
Mm-hmm.
I can
Mm-hmm.
just imagine. And I
Yes.
mean, the backlash they're going to get, we're going to see where it's not done. We're going to see where
Oh
it's going to
no.
go. And I have the courage to be disliked. I have the courage to push boundaries. And my grandmother always told me the most disliked people in the world are the ones who create change and make history. So
Period.
I'm just doing
Period.
what I'm doing. And
That's it.
I hope you continue to do what you do.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
as we come to the end, I want to make sure that any of the organizations, because I have a lot of leaders and organizations and business people who listen to this from all cultural backgrounds, if they're looking to have you come in and do a workshop, or if they're looking to come in and do an inspirational, keynote with them for their AGM or whatever, they want to contract you in to clean up the mess.
Yeah.
How can they find Janna Hines?
Yes. JannaAllenHines.com. That is
Very
where I
easy.
live. Just go. Yep. I get messages through there, all of those things. Also, all of the services I provide, in addition to training and keynotes, but workshops and policy review and sitting down with your leadership teams and understanding, doing focus groups and surveys and assessing what is the current climate right now, what is the current culture of the organization, what are those barriers. Those are those additional resources as well. So www.jannaallenhines.com. That is the place to find me.
And I will
And LinkedIn.
definitely make sure it's up on the screen when this is edited and everything, so you guys don't got to worry about writing down right quick. I didn't hear what Janna said. It will be posted, you guys. You'll be able to find Janna. And any last words that you want to give to our listeners or viewers, Janna?
I mean, the last thing would just be thank you so much for, the spaces that you so thoughtfully create, Tia, for us to show up in all of our dreams and uncertainty and fears. And I know other people on here have been sharing some real wisdom about their journeys. So I feel really honored to have been able to contribute to that. But the last thing for the listeners would be, to really think about, in those moments where you're nervous or you're scared to challenge someone, just think about, who does my silence benefit? Who ultimately gains something? Who is harmed by my silence when it comes to these issues of, diversity and racism or homophobia or anything like that? Just being able to sit with that for a moment of what happens if I do nothing. So that's something I leave my clients with, and I meditate on it every day of what happens if I say nothing. So
I
that would
love
be
it.
it.
You just left it with me. I wrote it down. Who does my silence benefit? And T is
Mm-hmm.
gonna take that, and I'm gonna do something with this. Who does my
Mm.
silence benefit? Wow, that's powerful. Actually, thank you, Janna, for that. And for our listeners and our viewers, it's unfortunate. Yes, we come to the end of another segment of the identity shift. But just make sure you follow us on social media. Go to our Shopify. Sorry, not Shopify, Spotify. Go over to our YouTube page and follow, like, share, and you'll be able to keep up with all the segments. And again, Janna, we thank you for coming on, and I look forward to having you back again to talk about something else you probably have in the works. But until next week, everybody, enjoy your week, stay safe, and make that money. See everybody later. Thank you for listening to Identity Shift. See everybody next week.